Okay, you're being recorded.
So Debbie, just introduce in today's date, please.
Are we on mute?
Okay. Today is June the 11th, 2024, and I'm Debbie Rowley. My design company is Debbie's Designs, and today I'm going to be talking about anchoring your threads.
Good.
Yay!
Anchors away.
Anchors away. Okay, are we ready? Can I share my screen? Okay, there we go.
Yes.
Okay, the way that I'm going to do this is I'm going to go over some general principles about pin stitches, loop starts, away knots, and the like. And then at the end, I'm going to do a demonstration. So if I talk about something that you would really like to see me demonstrate, let me know after I go through all of the general information, and then I've got everything set up so I can demonstrate for you.
One thing I'd like to interrupt, if anybody has something they want to ask, please put it in chat and then we'll read it to you when it's over, when you're ready, Debbie.
Okay. Okay. So what is an anchor in needlepoint? It is how we secure the thread to the canvas for stitching, and it's also how we end the thread after stitching. And probably most of us are self-taught, and we may have started with a knot. We may have just held the thread across the back and stitched over it. There are some stitches that we use that are better served by a different kind of anchor. So we'll go over some of those, and hopefully this will be some useful information that you can apply to your stitching from now on. So the simplest anchor is an away knot, or holding the thread on the back and stitching over it. And that's how I used to do it when I was doing cross stitch. And then you end off by weaving through the backs of the stitches. But is that the best way to anchor your thread? You can use an away knot to begin. An away knot is made by making a knot in the end of your thread, then inserting it from the front of the canvas. Usually it can be an in the path or a truly away knot. An in the path knot is placed about 1 to 2 inches away from the beginning point of your stitch in the direction you were stitching. So as you stitch, you cover the thread on the back, securing it, and you come to the knot, you just clip it off and continue stitching. An away knot is placed about 4 to 5 inches away from the beginning point, sometimes in the margin of the canvas. And the best way to handle an away knot is to place it in the direction you are stitching. After you are stitched a few stitches, you can clip off the knot, rethread the needle, and make a pin stitch or weave it into the backs of the stitches. Sometimes you have to wait a little bit longer before you can do a pin stitch. I was stitching some 8-pointed stars today, and it's difficult to see where the threads are crossing and where to place a pin stitch. And so usually I stitch those completely before I convert my away knot into a pin stitch. So you can use an away knot for the first stitches on your canvas. They're great for satin stitches. For a stitch that is not going to be woven or have tension or stress on the first stitches. And so stitches like a Jessica or a Walnetto or things of this nature where there's going to be tension and stress placed on the first stitch, an away knot is not going to be the best choice. And then also when you can't determine where to put a pin stitch, so you'll do a long away knot and convert it to a pin stitch later. When not to use an away knot. Okay, so I just mentioned that if the first stitches are going to have a lot of tension or stress on them, such as a Jessica or a Walnetto, when the stitch will not cover the back, such as a herringbone stitch does not have very much on the back of it, and so we have to find a different way to anchor the thread. And then when the stitches are very long, such as an Amadeus or a crescent, an away knot is not going to hold the thread securely, and you're not going to have the tension on the stitch that you want so that your first stitches look as lovely as your later stitches. You can use a loop start to begin. Now, there's a lot of information here. It's very wordy, but it's a very simple thing, and I will demonstrate this at the end. You can do a loop start for any non-variegated or overdyed thread. You cannot do an overdyed thread unless you want a heathered look to your stitching. And you have to be using an even number of strands. So 2 strands, 4 strands, etc. This is a very secure anchor. It's suitable for a wide variety of stitches. You begin by taking a length of thread that is twice as long as your preferred stitching length. So if you prefer to stitch with 24 inches, you would cut a length that is 48 inches. You separate out the desired number of strands one at a time and then recombine them. Fold the strands in half with the cut ends at one end and the fold at the other end. Then you thread your needle. From the front of the canvas, you insert the needle, leaving a loop on top. Then 1 canvas thread away, bring the needle up again, pass the needle through the loop. Then you insert the needle again, either where you brought it up to begin the loop start or at the end of the loop start. Either one is fine. And tighten the thread and then tug the loop to the back. This is a very secure way to anchor the thread if you're using an even number of strands. So when you're going to do a loop start, only make the loop start over a single canvas thread. Don't make it the length of your first stitch. So it can be a horizontal, it can be a vertical thread, or it can be a diagonal intersection. And you can't control the tension if you're trying to make your loop start over more than 1 canvas thread. So if you can't control the tension, you need to think of this as a pin stitch that you're going to cover. So you can place the loop where it will be under a longer stitch. If possible, don't put the loop at the beginning of the stitch or at the end of the stitch because it may come out. If possible, you want this loop start to be under your stitch. If your stitch is short and you can't put it in the middle, then you can put it at the end, but don't put it at the beginning. And if your first stitch, like you're doing a Scotch stitch and it's over a single canvas thread or a single intersection, you can make the loop start your first stitch. Okay, when to use the loop start. When you need a very smooth anchor, such as under satin stitches, or when you need a very secure anchor because there will be tension on the first stitches, such as a Jessica or a Walnetto. If you've ever had to take a loop start out, you will know how secure this is. Okay, for the most part, I like to use pin stitches. And pin stitches are extremely versatile, and you can make them a variety of ways. It's very secure. They're hard to take out, and you can convert a long away knot into a pin stitch when you can see where to put the stitch. It can be 3 times over a single canvas thread. It can be an L. It can be a T. It can even be a line of stitches. For instance, if you were doing a laid filling that was long lines, you can do pin stitches like back stitch in a row and then cover it with one of your long lines. And you can use it to begin or end your stitches. So the simplest pin stitch is 3 times over a single canvas thread. And this can be in any direction. It can be a horizontal thread. It can be a vertical thread. But you want it to be placed where it's going to be under your stitch. And I always do pin stitches from the front. That way I don't have to turn my canvas over. So you can also do an L stitch. And I always make a pin stitch with 3 stitches. So for an L stitch, It'll be, you'll either repeat the vertical or the horizontal, but you're going to do 3 stitches. You can make a T-stitch. And you can make a T-stitch so that your stitches end in the same shared hole, or you can make it so that they come out of the same shared hole. Either one is going to be fine. If you pierce the thread when you're making your T-stitch, it'll be fine because it's just going to hold it a little more securely. And then this is a line pin stitch. It can be a vertical line, a horizontal line, or a diagonal line. Okay, so this is the challenging part, how to figure out where to put a pin stitch. So one of the things that you have to do is you have to look at the final diagram of the stitch, not the beginning of the stitch, but the final part of it to see where most of the threads are crossing. So I've given some examples here of where you can put a pin stitch. So under this waffle stitch, I have a T-stitch. And this is a simple pin stitch that's going to be under a crescent. This is another simple pin stitch under a sprat's head. And this is a simple pin stitch anywhere along here where it can be under this teardrop crescent. Now, you'll notice one thing about my pin stitches. I do not have them in the stitching channel. Where the stitches are going to come up and go down, you don't want to put your pin stitch in that channel, because as you're stitching along and you see a stitch there, you may mistake the pin stitch for part of the stitch. And for something like a crescent, if I were to have my pin stitch, for instance, over here, and when I come to this place, I see that there's a stitch there, and I may not make the stitch that needs to go there because, oh, well, there's already a thread there. So you want to make sure that your pin stitches are going to be completely covered by the stitch and that they are not in your stitching channel. And you need to see where most of the threads are crossing. So when you're going to do a beginning pin stitch, one of the things that I do is I mark out the boundaries of a stitch. For instance, this is going to be a waffle stitch. And so I've marked out the corners of my waffle stitch just so I can see where's the middle, because I want my pin stitch to be under the stitch completely. And you'll see that I've done that here. I've got a mark for the outer dimensions of my stitch. Same thing here. I have a mark for the outer dimensions of the stitch, so I can see where's the stitching channel and where can I put my pin stitch. 3 times over a single canvas thread is a good anchor for something that is highly textured, like a Rhodes stitch. It's not so great for a waffle stitch because a waffle stitch is pretty flat, but it really is useful for anything that's going to be textured. Okay, now how do you end with a pin stitch? Now this is the tricky part, and I've had some stitchers tell me that they don't like to end with a pin stitch because they're afraid that they're going to mess up the stitch. So what you do is you just take your fingernail or the tip of a needle and gently move the threads aside until you can see the canvas underneath. Then you can see where to put your pin stitch. Always do it from the front so that you don't accidentally catch the threads, because after you've made the pin stitch, if some of the threads have gotten out of whack, you can gently move them back into place as long as you have not pierced the thread. And you can make an ending pin stitch just 2 times instead of 3, because there won't be any tension on this stitch from now on, and it should hold. So sometimes if you think, well, I can't quite get 3, but I can get 2, then that will work. Okay, so always make them from the front. When you are snipping off the excess thread, either at the beginning or the ending, you pull up on the thread that's going to be snipped. Then when cut, the little end should kind of disappear under the canvas when you release the tension. If you're snipping from the front, hold the scissors as flat to the canvas as possible. And I know some people like curved tip scissors. Someone has actually given me some curved tip scissors that I'm going to be experimenting with. But I always hold my scissors as flat to the canvas as I can. And I've been doing pin stitches for 7, 8 years, and I've never cut the stitch. I've just cut the thread that I was trying to get rid of. If you're snipping from the back, again, you're going to want to snip as close to the canvas as you can because you don't want the little end to come back up through to the front. Some threads, such as rayon or a single strand, may require more than 3 times to hold it securely. And I have found this when I'm doing a single strand of cotton floss or silk floss, I usually have to go 4 times. And with rayon, if I'm working with rayon, instead of just a T-stitch, I may do a plus sign because that will be the 4th stitch and it will hold it a little bit more securely. So after you make your beginning pin stitch, tug on the waist end and the working end, and you tug them in opposite directions. I'll show you what I mean. And that kind of snugs everything down to the canvas and improves the tension. And then you can snip off the waist thread. Okay, so if you're going to convert a pin stitch, an away knot to a pin stitch, you need to make sure your away knot is 5 to 6 inches away so that you'll have plenty for rethreading the needle and making the pin stitch. In some stitches, it may be difficult to see where to place a beginning pin stitch. Remember, we're trying to get it under the stitch. So you may need to start with an away knot that you convert to a pin stitch later. Okay, so when I've done an 8-pointed star, for instance, with several layers, I will start with a long away knot. And so if I'm going to start here, I will put my away knot completely opposite. I'm not going to put it over here or over here because I need to have some good tension on this thread for making my first stitch. Then after I have got enough layers, I will convert to a pin stitch. Now, when you look at something like an 8-pointed star, you can see that here's all these places where the thread is crossing. And these stitches are long and somewhat loose. And so it's really easy to just gently move the stitch aside so you can see the canvas underneath and make your pin stitch. And then you can clip it off and gently move the stitches back in place. Now, there's also an intermediate pin stitch. An intermediate pin stitch is used to hide your thread carries when you're doing an open stitch. For instance, this open triangle Amadeus. So when you get to this point and you're ready to stitch the next side, if you were to bring the needle up here, your thread carry is going to show. So what you need to do is just do a single stitch under the stitches. My diagram didn't quite get under, but it would be under the stitch. So then your thread carry is going to go to here and then to here, and it won't show through the opening. And I've used intermediate pin stitches when I've been doing Milanese stars, Milanese windmills. And especially if I'm working with 2 layers or 2 different colors of thread, and I want to make sure that my thread carry from one color to the other is not going to show. And so this is just a handy little tip to keep in mind. You can use an intermediate pin stitch. It's just one time over a single canvas thread to get your thread back into position so that your thread carry isn't going to show through. Okay, now how do you end threads? The most common way to end a thread is to weave through the back of the stitch. This isn't necessarily the best method. You can do the same thing as an away knot. You can just bring the thread to the front in the direction that you're stitching, stitch over it, and then clip off the waist when you come to it. This way, it's not going to disturb the stitches that are on the front of the canvas. You can use a pin stitch under the stitch or in an open area that you're going to cover later, or you can do a Bargello tuck. So a Bargello tuck is something that most of us do without knowing that there was actually a name for it. So if this is the back, and I run through the stitches on the back, come back under, go through the next ones, come back under, go through the next ones, come back under and go through. So that I've kind of looped my thread around several times to hold it securely. And do be careful not to disturb the stitches that are on the front of the canvas. Oh, that's it. Okay. Kind of ran through that really fast. So if you have, I'm going to show you and going to demonstrate how to do some of these things. Okay, so I'm going to start with a loop start. So this is really a long length. I don't think I want to work with that long length because I'm not actually going to be stitching much with it. I'm just going to be demonstrating. Okay, so I have taken my strand and I have folded it in half, and I have my ends together, and I have a loop at the other end. So now I'm going to thread my needle. Okay, and from the front, I go through, I leave the loop on the front, come up one canvas thread away, pass the needle through the loop, snug it down to the canvas, and then I can go in here or here, either one, tug it to the back, and then I'm ready to cover. It's like a pin stitch. And usually if you have to take this out, take it out from the back because you won't be able to see it from the front. Let's see if I can just snip this off, because I also want to show you how to do a T-stitch. So my T-stitch, again, I'm going to do this from the front. Good. My needle fell right through. If you stitch with a frame, this is a lot easier to do than if you're trying to hold your work in your hand. Okay, now I'm going to hold on. This is my waist end. I'm going to tug against, got my working end on the bottom, and I'm tugging against it. Now I'm going to pull up, hold my scissors really flat, and snip that off. And now I'm ready to do a waffle stitch. Now I'm going to do this really fast, and I am not going to be laying these stitches because I mostly just want to show you how to end. I don't have very much thread in my needle. I won't be able to do a complete waffle stitch, but I've got enough that I can show you how to end under a stitch. Okay, so now I'm going to put my waffle stitch right under here. So I'm just going to take my finger, move the thread aside so I can see the canvas underneath. I'm going to do a T-stitch. And keep from unthreading my needle. And now I'm going to snip this off. Hold my scissors really flat. And then I'm going to take the tip of my needle and just smooth these threads back into place over my pin stitch. Okay, do y'all have anything that you want me to demonstrate for you?
Nobody has asked any questions in the chat. Does anybody have any questions?
So,
Wait, we have a question here.
well, it's not a question. Well, I guess it is. Ask her if she uses a single pin stitch to help trying to keep the pressure if you're doing really long stitches.
So the question is, if you can you use a pin stitch in the middle of a stitch if it's a very long stitch to keep it flowing?
Well, I've never done it, but I don't see why you couldn't.
Am I saying that right? So that you keep the tension.
Right.
I see we do have a couple of questions too. So I know that sometimes when you're changing direction, won't you do a pin stitch in a certain point so that you can be in the right position for your next stitch? Let's say you're coming to a right angle in a square. Do you know what I'm
Yeah.
saying?
Yeah.
Sometimes don't you use a pin stitch so that you are stitching the next stitch properly? You know what? Am I saying that clearly?
Yeah. When I talked about intermediate pin stitches, that was kind of the
Yes.
same thing. And so,
Yeah.
one of the things that we try to do when we're stitching is to have equal tension on every end of the stitch. And sometimes you may need to take, like for instance, if you had a really long stitch, let me make a really long stitch.
Mm-hmm.
And if you were concerned that this is going to wiggle around on you, I guess you could take
No,
a
I-
little
No.
pin stitch underneath.
Was us. Oh.
Just to make sure
Like
that it's going
that?
to stay.
Yeah.
Does
Okay.
that make sense?
Yeah.
Yeah, that's
We
good.
usually do it closer to the ends, but
So Jan says when she does it closer to one of the ends, but she does that. Yeah. We did have a couple of other comments.
Okay.
One was from Kimberly who said, do you use these for counted stitch or do you use them? She said counted, but it can be used for either counted or for painted canvases,
Oh,
can't it?
yes, absolutely. Anytime you're doing any kind of stitch. And I like to do pin stitches because I don't like to have to turn my canvas over because sometimes I lose track of where I am and all of that. So if I can do it from the front and that way I don't have to turn my canvas over, it's faster for one thing.
Mhm.
And I'm not disturbing the stitches that I've already got in place. So, I just find it so much easier to do my stitches, all of my stitches from the front if I can.
Okay. Also Annelle, who I didn't say hello to Annelle before, Annelle's here, and she said she wanted to comment that she was surprised that there were so many ways to do a pin stitch. So that's nice. I remember when I first learned, people were talking about putting the pin stitch out in the margin.
Yes.
Is that something that you do sometimes?
Well, that's in a way not,
That's in a way not. Okay.
as opposed to a pin stitch.
Mm-hmm.
Yep.
although
Yep, that's
Hold on.
something.
I leave it in as opposed to cutting it off.
Right. So if you're doing it in the margin, lots of times we leave it in and then in the finishing, they take care of it.
Right.
Mhm. Okay, any other questions or comments? Okay. What do you think, everybody? Was that something? I think I learned some things.
Yeah, I did.
I did.
I did learn a lot. I mean, tonight, Debbie, you clearly
Oh, yeah.
showed, it was very nice. You clearly showed what we could do, especially like black work, how we could do it along the lines and it still will look beautiful.
That's the whole thing with black or white work,
Yeah.
isn't it?
Yeah,
Yeah.
it is. I know.
Mhm.
Those are really very different
Mhm.
and unique.
Yeah.
I think
So
I saw a question about someone wanting to know, could you do it with tent stitch or basket weave?
Mhm.
I think that a
Oh,
pin
there
stitch,
is. And Heather has a question now too.
yeah.
Yeah, we have some more questions. Can you do it when you do 10 stitch?
I don't think that a pin stitch would be the best choice for a tent stitch or basket weave. I think in a way knot, an in the path way knot that you stitch toward and then clip off the knot when you come to it would be a better way to anchor, because a basket weave or a tent stitch is very short.
Very short. And we have Tony said she learned several things tonight. Thanks. And Heather has a question. Do you want to take it off mute, Heather? No? Heather disappeared. She disappeared. She was
Yeah.
there. I thought
Her
she had a
video-
question.
Her video
video.
isn't showing.
Oh, okay. Heather, do you have a question? If you can just take it off mute?
yeah, you're on mute now.
Can I take it off mute for her?
No.
No, you
No.
can't.
Okay. Okay. Anybody else have a question? If Heather wants, she can send it as chat or she can send it to us later. I don't see any other questions.
I have one.
Oh, good. Who's that talking?
Susan?
Susan Johnson.
Sue Johnson. Okay, Susan.
Yeah,
Good.
I'm panicky about clipping on the front, even if it's nice not to turn it over, but I don't trust myself or my scissors. How, is there a particular kind of scissor you recommend, or just
No.
get it flat to the canvas?
Just hold it flat to the canvas. See, my scissors are just regular scissors. They're not special scissors or anything. Let's see. Let's see if I can spotlight this again. Let me go to here.
We spotlight
They're not curved blades or anything. They're just straight.
I've
And
lost it.
I hold them down as flat as I can get them.
Yeah, I'm going on another
Now
page.
you do want your scissors
There
to
she
be,
is.
you want them to be sharp. If they're dull, then they're going to have to saw away on the thread. But, if you just hold them very flat and you're pulling up on the thread, let's see. I can clip off my away knot that's over here. I'm holding it up.
You can see that with that thing there.
My fingers are in the way. And then you just snip it off.
You can move it just.
I was trying to. It didn't
And,
move.
just so long as you keep your scissors as flat as you can. Like I said, I've been doing this for a number of years and I have never cut my stitch. I've just snipped the thread.
Okay.
I have a question.
Oh, good.
Sure.
Is that Haviva?
Yes. Can you start just about most of the stitches from a loop start, with a loop start?
You can do a loop start if you're using an even number of strands.
Okay.
So if you're like, for instance, if you were using a ribbon, you can't do a loop start unless you have doubled it. But if you're using 2 strands of floss, 4 strands of floss, an even number of strands, you can do a loop start. And it's a great way to anchor, and I use it all the time.
Heather is visible and has unmuted, so she may ask her question.
Okay. Go, Heather.
I actually didn't have a question. I was just going to say it was a really great presentation. And the question, though, that came up about black work, if you're doing reversible black work, usually you want to be piercing the thread on the back so that it's not visible. I don't see us pin stitches working in that situation.
Well, I don't do black work, and so I can't really speak to that. I do a lot of I do county canvas work.
Yeah. That's why I was going black work. Yeah, I don't think so.
Okay. Yeah, I don't either. Good. Anything else?
It was great.
It
Thank
was
you so
good. Thank you
much.
so much.
was
Does
very good.
anybody have
Well, thank you
anything?
for inviting me.
Oh, we love having you. You come anytime you want to come to San Diego, let us know.
Yeah.
Okay.
Yeah, Shirley can take me to the zoo again.
Yeah.
Right.
Yeah.
I'll take you to the wild animal park. How about that?
Yeah.
Oh,
Yeah.
yay, that'd be fun
They
Oh,
too.
call
yeah.
it the safari park
That's right.
now.
Did your husband like that cap or that item you got for him?
Oh, yes, he loved it. He wears it all the time. I
Oh,
took it with
good.
the,
So for those of you who don't know what we're
picture.
talking about, Debbie was here last year for a workshop, and one night Shirley took her to the San Diego Zoo to walk around in the evening. They have evening zoo here in the summer,
Yep.
so that
Mhm.
worked out very nicely.
Yeah. Yeah, I
Well,
think it was, I was there in October and it was like Halloweeny.
Yes,
Yeah.
it was.
Oh, that's what it was. It was the Halloween night. Yeah. So any of you, we promise if you come out to San Diego, we'll take you to the zoo.
Or the
Okay.
wild
Or the-
animal park.
Yeah,
either
so the
one.
one. So, or Balboa Park. We've got lots of places, but
Yes.
Oh, yeah.
main thing, we just want to stitch with you and see you. So with that, I'm just going to say, if nobody has anything else, I want to wish you all a good June, and we'll see you after the 4th of July.
Oh, look, is this,
She put
prizes?
the door prize winners in the chat.
Okay, let's look at them. Okay, thank you, Chris. The door prize winners are Heather Cowan, Carla Hamilton, Linda Plyer, Louise Rappaport, and Stephanie Wong. Yay, good, good, good,
Yay.
good.
Michelle, did you get
great.
that?
Michelle, get that? Is Michelle still there? Michelle,
Yes.
do you still
I'm
want to?
writing them down. I'm writing them
Okay.
down.
And since this was your program, do you want to say anything? Is there anything else you'd like to say, Michelle?
No, I think we're great. Actually, I think this is kind of nice to have a program, but that our
Yeah.
meeting, with those East Coast people is ending actually a little bit better.
Yeah.
I
Mhm.
don't have to stay up quite so late.
Right.
We're glad you like it because Michelle and I and Chris are talking about more programming like this.
So
So
This
with
is
great
great.
teachers.
I think
Okay?
it's good. I
Yeah.
think it's really good. So thank you. We appreciate it. And I look forward to seeing you all again. And just send us a note if there's anything you want. We'll be sending out the pictures. So if any of you want any of these canvases, we'll send them out to you.
And
Okay?
Debbie, I'll see you in seminar. Okay?
Okay.
Okay. Thank you so much.
Okay. Thank
Debbie,
you.
you've been a
Bye.
great-
Thank you, Debbie. Yay, Debbie. Bye,
Yay.
everybody.
Thank you.
Bye.